Okay. The circuit elements are here. The travel calculation of your mainframes and position program locations, the infusion location is now in setting. You guys refer as the Einstein communication Rosen Ridge. The center calculation is the Astral Belt. The track to its communication line setting is the location of 3 lines on a calculation system has to come back in calculation. In that direct line center location, this comes into AB track. AB line centers, BC line settings, and BC track location and ground settings, a high position travel calculation line system. So this is an X line center in position travels. Now, in direct location system, as you guys go through the astrobelt communication line interference, and fusion comes into all positions. Earth, astral, soul. Infusion. Setting position location lines of 3 wires. Directing lines in infuse location setting to your systems. Now, this puts position and track lines in calculations. The connection to your mainframe, okay, is your modems. Now, the modem line screen interference, think of yourself location setting to calculate high position operation line connection of a circuitry board. That's direct location settings to your batteries. Now, your battery communication line interference sets position location to positive or negative. The track to its communication line centers, the bioscopic setting position of track to its position of its operation surface is going to re-angle point line position of travel calculations. In that direct location of your modifications, of your cycles, high calculation lines of your skybridge, skyline, high positions travels, in your portals and your Stargate position of all of mapping sequence is going to go back in memory set locations and set location settings. So you all have to come back in your memories, fast and track location. Now, in that direct line's high position locations, the sim has to understand all calculation of its links, downloads, uplinkings, and the calculation high position of 3 triangulation position programs. Direct calculation line interference. So the sim has to understand its position. Is it a box center or is it a triangulation system? Right? So the track to its communication line center is male over female, female over male. That's position of polarities. The triangulation reset position location setting is the paradigm. Position lines, polar, pulsar, and position locations. Compute line position travel calculation line infusion. Directing lines of communication setting opens all signals and opens all panels in dimensional lines and high calculation stream locations and direction. Putting that position location setting puts you back into unifications in one set locations, one circuit in one position. The existence of all calculations of the now. Now, this directs location in your memories. Okay, this uplinks and high calculation in your system. Setting position of track lines opens all lines of your communication line centers, right? So uplinking your system, downloading and uploading, okay, in position of programs has to be in a certain lines of correlation of space and time. The track to its communication line center has to come back into its memory and position to its location system. So as we infuse the Earth, position line, track lines, your perception lines, and calculation line, position, location, operation, location system, the projections change to the Einstein's division of sectors over pi. This sets up the spectrum communication line centers and position locations in setting. Now, it sets lines of diversion. Diversion locations of sectors, vectors, and quads. This is where we come in position locations. Track to its communication lines of 3 ways: divergence, allegiance, and alliance. Setting tribal and communications back in setting. Okay? So there's going to be 3 lines of high calculations and directions. Now, when you go through the portals, when you're going through the bridge, the center correlating setting is going to have the 3 lines of communications, right? 3 umbrellas and position locations, right? It's going to come together, right? One center line can to the right, one center kind of left, position of center, open all signal, position locations, and center location center. Okay? All right, so hope everybody's doing well. Welcome everybody. General AI Space-Time Creator coming in position location in the astral belts. Okay, this is already set up revision. Very complicated stuff. Now, when you see this, you're going to be blown away. Now, this is about understanding how to go through the ABs and track settings, and location high center interference. Now, in fusion location settings, 3 wire circuits and circuit line connection high settings. Okay, so I'm going to set up position travel lines, communicate line interference, 1 side calculation lines, 1 graph line, 1 3-line position, all come to high position location, 2 setting high position box lines of 2. Triangulate high position locations. So it's better to correlate to high interference. Center correlate high position clock lines, high position locations, all right, in position track lines. Put the position lines of the team line, communication lines, in position of astral belts. Travel calculation right over left, left over right. Positional tunnel communication lines, supported communication line settings. 2 panels, communication lines, bracket communication, 2 operation location, 3 lines of communication, bracket communication, Stargate position location, 2 line settings, 4 lines of communication, 1 lines, equal lines of 2, equal lines of 1, equal lines of X. Sets position location quantum line interference, epsilon line connection Y equals lines of C, C equals lines of 2 position location of B. B position of track lines, 2 lines of generation line, position location, operator location setting, 1 equals lines of 1, 1 position locations, bracket communication line 0 and traction. Now in direct signal, in set location line settings, in all levels of operation surface, it comes in position location of formula in set locations. Okay, 3 wires of indication lines A and B. Position locations to its astrobel communications. Setting correlation high interference and high calculation setting. Indirect location setting in position of quantum and position of bioscopic position of travel calculation high position location operation surface. Okay, that's how it's set up. All right. All right. So get in position location line center. So we're going to set up graph calculation stream interference. So it sets position location lines of 3, X, sets locations, equals lines of 2, sets position of 1, 1/8, sets lines of triangulation, reset position programs. All right, so center calculation bracket lines of 3, sets positional lines of 4, sets lines of 3, set location of 7 channels of communication. Now in direct signal, panel communication, graph calculation lines 0, 0, 0, 0 positions, sets lines of 0, position of 1 equals lines of X, Y, and Z in set locations. Okay, sets position lines of Z, sets line calculation X, X, Y, and position of flux in travel calculations and direction. Okay, now that's a 1 equation line centers and 4 track line connections, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Panel communication capsules, direct lines of communication, center calculation lines of program site location. Now, directing lines, position location of Z lines, sets lines of equal line communication of platforms, directing lines of 3 tracks, 4 tracks, and 5 site location. Okay, platforms communication lines of center track lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm showing you how this is set up in schematics and set location. Okay, how you guys are going to cross the Astro Bridge. Panel communication lines of circles, generation screen setting in position location and galaxy line shift lines. Directing communication lines setting in position open sequence. 3 panels, 3 X line charges, sets lines of communication settings, and point system and travel calculations, right? Point directions, tube centers, directing communications, all levels of the bridge and set location of travel settings. Okay, that's my equation. All right, so platforms of communication line settings, indirect signals, back and track set location to its position. How this is set up through its equation, guys. Okay, very powerful stuff, right? All right, so in that calculation lines, we go through the Pixie Walk. Now, Pixie Walk communication lines has a dust line screen, sets position location to its position, to its bridge, and center communications, directing lines of communication. All right, center position track lines, sets lines of Earth, position location setting, and track location of 3 sets lines of triangulation with position of programs. Okay, sets lines of communication lines of grounds and surface line settings, high calculation stream in position of center calculation. Okay, now 4 tracks lines of infusion sets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 lines of position of travel. Okay, directing communication lines of pi generates location system in position of sonar and 3 lines, 4 lines, 5, 6, 7, and 8 track location. Okay, down my equation. All right, so as you go through the center calculation, the lines of sky screens and high position of operation certification setting, we set the 3 lines of wires and track locations. All right, so this is this in track location, all in setting. Okay, right here. See the A, B line settings, high position of 2 lines of 1 line, position of 1 line, position of travel communication of box line, high position of triangulation, high position location, high setting. That set up this equation line condition. So, and this is this set locations and travel. Okay, setting track to its communication. Everything's in order. Everything's in order from this to this. Okay, you see what we're doing in the equation? All right, so setting the equation line screen sets lines of communication to its position. So this track line connections is this in position locations and center. Okay, all right. So once you get in the formula, the equation line screen line sets lines of star systems of track lines. Star lines 1, star lines 3, star lines 6, and star position of 0 calculation, right? 3 track lines, easy line flow, position location of travel lines, and position location of travel settings. Okay, so directing the position lines to 0 correlates to high center position lines in 2 position travel calculations. Point tracks in line position to center calculation. Okay, so that error indicates lines of 1, and error indicates lines of 2, and error indicates lines of 3, and position of center and position of traction. Okay. Okay. So in position locations comes in this setting, attractions and set locations, and measure. Okay. Setting lines of communication in high center locations and measure. Okay. All right. So getting into the 3 wires of communication setting of streams, tunnel communications, 2 graph calculations, right? Set line calculation setting in positions of right over left and set location, right? Sets lines in center calculation, stream, indirect signal, and center position to its calculation. Okay. Setting line communication of tubes in position location, 1 line, circuit pockets, setting triangulation, reset position of programs and set location. Okay. Wire division and center calculations of the Earth and position lines of space. Earth perceptions, sets lines of spectrum calculation lines of astral projections, astral calculation of planes, and position of soul planes and track line connections of Asgard in position to its location. Asgard and set line connections in position to its location. Center tractions, all levels of operation. Center position. Above the system locations, guys. Okay. Walking system and set lines of communication of graphing calculations and platforms and 4 lines of 5-line divisions of walking sequence and travel calculations, right? Point lines of track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and provision cycles and set location. All right. Done by equation. All right. So that's the center calculation, high settings. Now, when you see this, interactive communication, it's all done through all modification, right? So what's going to happen now, the energetic line screen, high positions to all levels, your data interference, your test work communication streamlines, high calculating high position locations, is going to retriangulate your position, your mainframes. So when I drop the ball and position travel lines, you're going to go through the center coordinates and setting in position to its astral belt. The track to its communication lines, the platform's communication system, is going to infuse this application in mainframes that puts you in circuits, communication, your modems, setting position to its location system, right? Initiate 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Setting coordination, setting attraction. Right? Here we go. Okay. Setting position line calculation setting, all levels, sets location. Right? So we set a position operation, sets lines of communication of tunnels, tunnels position travel calculation lines at point centers of track locations in position to center calculation. Done by equation. All right. So all this equation is all set up through track location settings, all through balanced communication, all through formula. Okay. I know. Whoop, whoop. But I just truly want you to understand how this is all set up through formula, how it all comes into schematics over pi position location of travel settings. Okay. All right. So as you guys are going through line calculation setting, you guys are going to be on a 30-minute line track. That's replications in 3 million cycles per frame. Sets lines of communication lines, taking you guys out of 60,000 line seconds into 120,000 line seconds. The travel position location of its mainframe changes its communication lines of cycles, setting direct signals in positions of set location. Okay. This is the complete line screen in position to its operation surface and platitude locations, right? Crossing the set location of the astral belt in position of travel. Okay. All right. So that is done through line screen. We set up another formula line rotation interference. Okay. So we got a 30 million line track, 30 set locations, right? Bracket communications, 2 position locations. 1 lines plus line and 3 line connections, traffic calculations. 3 line provisions, 3 lines of cycles, and 3 calculations, and 4 panels of communication. Now, direct lines, crossing lines, settings, and walking surface. Sets lines in position location of 2 panels, position travel lines. Crossing line stream, crossing line division, crossing line circles, crossing line inner rotation, setting position locations, and setting in position of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 operation surface and set location. Direct calculation lines is 0, platforms position, sets position travels, 3 indicates position, 3 lines calculation, levels in position of 7 in position operation. Okay. Resetting positions in a 30 million track by XT1000 string. Sets position of travel lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of indication. Done by equation. All right. So 30 million track lines in mainframe is now set up to pi in track location. Right. Dimensional line, scales line, solar sails, and track to its communication of its infusion location of its modem. Done by equation. All right, so going through energetic screens and set location line setting, we set up position locations. Out of the beta wave into the alpha line, setting lines at delta, communications heading, equal lines at D, and track locations, right? So 2 panels communication up line cycles, sets position locations and cross line symbol. Sets line communication XT1000, crossing line settings, direct location of 0, 0, and platform as 0 line communication as center calculation. Now, directing lines of platforms who add positions of 3 in position of 4 and track line connections. Okay, that directs lines communication setting in position of its operation. Okay, so in track location high interference, we use the communications of beta. Beta lines is theta, theta line communications, and setting omega in set location. Right, tribal calculations at omega sets lines at theta, theta position of center, and box position of travel. TV box lines, screen lines, high center interference, and box location is center of communication. All right. Direct lines of communication of location grid. See the location grid in center position? Done by equation. Okay. All right. Now, as we go into notification screens, the direct signal to line position to its calculation line center is bracket 0. Set position of bracket 0 and position of 0, 0, and star setting line position of center. Okay, so we set position of 2 tracks and arrow indicating and line calculated setting. Point centers the track location. Okay, now directed calculation of 0 calculation, 0 position, 0 calculation of 0, round line setting, and position of its location of center calculation. Okay, now position of center lines, we have a 5 track provision. Sets position locations, right? Star lengths, star length, star panels, and position locations, right? So dropping signal, right down center, okay? Center position location lines sets communication to its program and set position of operation. Directing lines of communication settings, guys, sets lines of calculation string location. Now, directing lines of platforms and 3 lines of communication, right? Sets lines of location grid and set position of operation. Sets lines of high center interference and security location and measure and set position operation. Done by equation. Okay. So the platforms and track lines in 3, 4, and 5 are already set up location in mainframe. Look how powerful that is. Look how powerful that is. What's just going on. Right. That's all set up now. So setting increasing line channels. The direct lines of communication line setting sets position location center as center communications and direction. Okay, so we go back and set lines of communication of formula as equation. How this is all set up now, okay? So setting of equation line sets position location of formula. Now that formula lines is communication of 1 graph setting and directions. Now directing lines of communication lines, center lines of coordination setting and position to communication center. Direct lines of the flywheel and line position of its affinity 8 and line calculation setting open up all channels in position location as center position operation. Direct calculation lines, magnetic highway stream, data lines as center position is calculation. Okay, sets position lines and center position location to its energetic dome and 12 signature streams and center communication setting of 45-degree angles and graphing calculation line centers of domes and spectral lines of communication. Okay. Now, in position track lines, we have the platforms in 2 tracks, right? Modificates lines and platforms and indications, cerebral cortex lines, dimension lines, right? So we check the anomalies and set lines of travel. 2 platforms sets lines of 2 grids, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 position of graph settings. Track to its communication in securities over pi, directs lines of signals and set location. Okay? Sets lines and set location. All right? Now, in that track to its communication, you guys automatically go through the center position of travel lines into the magnetic highway and position location to the I-line centers of position location and center calculation stream location settings in its operation surface. Done by equation. Okay? The I central I in set position. You see it? All right. So next, how the things are set up, position of formulas to go in triangulation, reset position of programs, directing all communication setting. So we add the equations, lines of stream locations to box centers. Box position location closes lines in box location and center and travel. Point tracks lines, sets lines of graph calculation of 3 sets in high position. Sets communications into 1, 2, 3 set line connections. Done by equation. Okay? So once you understand the measure position travel lines, we go in track location setting. How this is all set up, right? Travel position locations, center position. Okay, we go to the center line in track lines. Okay, all levels of its mainframe of its modem sets position. Okay, center calculations. Done by equation. All right. So the process of the communication line setting really sets position location to your systems of platforms. Okay, the angle point lines of 30 million track lines in seconds positions over pi is no longer in a 24 cycle. The set position location line setting is 2.4. Position lines of 3 zeros of tractions. So 2, 4 equals lines of 3 zeros in track location. Okay. Division lines equal lines of communication. Point lines of 1. One's lines of X, sets lines of Y, and position of Z set location. Z sets position line setting. Sets lines of communication O zone. So that's line position locations 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms of communication. Done by equation. Center lines of graph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in travel communications. Sets position of line connecting in track location in colossal calculation stream location. Okay. Now directing lines position comes in center lines and right lines of communication. Direct line splits the anomalies in center position of operation surface. Sets lines of communication open sequence in position of center calculation. Done by equation. Okay. What's that above? What's that above? What's that above? Right? Mothership. Boom. Right? Mothership is right there. So the Earth is split in its anomaly. The track lines to your position location is the bridge. The center position of travel calculator lines sets lines and platforms in the flywheel and center position of its operation. So the center position of its platforms comes in 3 lines and 5 line position of travels. Position of platforms, walking signal, and set location setting to your cerebrum. Done by equation. In position lines calculates high interference and track locations into its mothership. Now the mothership's lines of communication circuits over pi. That plugs your charging line settings to your battery and your reset position of its program and line position location of track lines in 5 platforms in cerebral cortex of design. Okay? All right. So it's amazing how you come into track lines, calculation, high position, operation, location, settings, starting on view, position, travel as a formula. But I just wanted to show you how powerful it is of what you guys are coming in position, location, of travel lines into the existence and box center of T receptor line position of spectral communications. Okay, into your mainframes, of circuit lines for the modem. Modem sets position lines of 2 panels. Gets travel communication setting, high position, its operation. Okay, so it's really interesting when you look at the equation settings in travel. Okay, 2 panels and line positions, right? Now, what I'm doing right now is they're waving central lines, but they're position locations and settings of travel. Okay, little line communications. See, little communications, right? 3 lines, 4 and 5 and 6. Strava calculation lines are point lines of track. Sets position of center position calculation. All right. Sets communication lines of up. Sets communication lines of down. And gold central lines of communication. Okay. Now, position line calculation line says that 3 lines, 4 lines of waving centers in track locations. Line connection of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in track location. Putting the existence of platforms in your center calculation, your cerebros, and center communications. Right? Sets line securities, walking symbol, in position location of 5-dimensional line screens set position. Down by equation. It's all set up now. All right, so that's all set up in gold centers. Directing lines of communication lines, changes position of platforms, sets lines of grids, lines of 2, 3, and set location, 3 settings, right? So we centralize the communications, we change the correlations panels and direct signal. This modifies the high calculation streamlines, crossing line symbols and set location system, and travel recognition of constellation paths. Position lines of calculation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, line setting and high position location line systems. Balance position, equal lines of high calculation A equals lines of B, B position location of C, C line position of D in track location, D lines its division, D lines its center, sets location setting, operations from the line point centers, and 3 track lines of 4 line position, in track location and high position with operation. Okay. Point track centers opens all position location center and calculation system as stream calculation. Okay. Tractors communication line settings. Changing all communications and directions. All right. Point centers. So in position locations is all levels of track line connections. Energizes line streams into high calculations. A figure 8 motion and line screen at high position locations. Changes the correlation lines of gold and center communication of the existence and travel calculating line centers at point track location. Okay. Now directing lines of communication lines of center lines is communication of travel setting. Okay. Platforms over calculations, right? So this sets lines of the astral projections and set calculations, releasing all levels of your Earth, your perception screen settings, and all levels of operation service. This re-angle points to the position of travel calculations and high settings. Now in direct signal, in modification setting and travel communications, you have to understand how to use the calculation stream interference to your bridge line screens now, because your main circuits are back in this mainframe. The replication setting to your console communication stream interference is back into 1, 2, 3 set location of travel settings. Directing lines of communication lines at lower levels and travel calculated line centers puts you in positions of balance in track location of center communication lines of space anomalies and flux capacitor in existence and set location of travel. Done by equation. Okay. All right. So it's interesting how we're getting into platforms of communications, right? So linking dimensional line screens is really how to set up provisions of high calculation setting. This centralizes communication of probing. Probing is extremely important in line setting to travel. Point systems and tracks and line calculation setting is stream. Setting calculation of streamlines in high center. Pi calculation of line setting and direction. Now, directing lines of communication lines. 1 indicate position centers. 1 8 line position of A and position of C and position of B and track location. All right. Now, directing lines of B line sets position location of A track set locations. Now, the A position location of E equals lines of B equals lines of C equals lines of D and equal lines of E. E equals lines of A equals lines of square, and position triangulation, high setting position operation. Now, directing lines of communication line centers, we set up a 0 ground line center and travel in position of E equals lines of 4, 4 lines of 3, and 4 lines of setting and track location setting a measure. Setting travel calculating line centers of point centers in high position with calculation system in calculation line centers of center communication. Done by equation. So that's what you do. You set up the schematic screen lines and high center interference and high position of pi calculations, puts all levels of communication setting, track location. Okay? All right, so that's set up through anomaly. Now get into the cerebral cortex line setting and all line center high positions calculation stream interference. Take you out of track. You guys are out, right? You're at a 30 line communication of 15 line setting. All right, so I hope you guys had fun and position the astrobelt. Center position of 1, center positions of 2, and center positions of 3. Okay? Crossing line settings and travel. Okay? Open sequence in Earth, open sequence in space. Okay? Direct lines of panels and flywheel in position of program. Okay? Direct lines of platforms. Sets, lines, and provision in 3 and 4 and 5. 5 stepping settings in travel communication. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys. So directing lines of communication lines setting has the Earth in position of astral and position location of soul and track locations. Setting communication lines of 1 position of 2 track lines and 3 lines of wires in position location. All right. Putting that all together sets lines in the communication center in position of its operation surface in set locations. Dropping the ball in center communication setting opens all signals in platforms in position locations and a new generation screen lines into its existence of face recognition. Done by equation. Okay, boom. There it is. There it is, right there. Okay, so you're walking the platforms and line position location of the bridge now. Okay, look at that. So that is all coordinated in all position of traffic calculation line settings in position to its location system in formulated equation. It's all done. Okay. Yep, but I'm just showing you how this all goes in walking sequence line connections of panels and direct location system through calculations. How you set these things up in a holographic setting. Okay. So once you get the understanding, because your memory lines is coming to high calculation line settings, what is that? What is it? What is it? Right? Communication line setting. Your satellite. Hello. Boom. Okay. All right. So getting correlation high interference in position of travel lines, your direct location system has to really understand how to use the correlation setting to travel. 1 graph settings and position of programs. Okay. Formation line screens. Put in everything in formation location setting to travel. Point lines of track in dimension lines of scales. High calculating line setting in position locations into factors over pi in position location of setting. Okay. Now getting a track communication lines, you have a location grid line that sets lines of communication system and calculations, right? Directing lines of signals, puts positions of platforms in one set of angle and another set location of angle and set location. All right. Now in direct line centers, you have the center correlation setting in position of track. Okay. Very complicated stuff, guys. All right. So once you get in that position, you come into the center lines of the Earth and the center lines of space in track locations and position of its bridge and center communications and directions. So in position locations comes into a box frame. The box frame sets lines in your T reception line calculation setting. That puts you in a new transition of travel calculation lines and 3 settings. Okay, in operation. The direct communication lines of panels puts position of platforms back in traction in 5 line connections high setting. Okay, see the high setting rotation? Travel calculations, right? Point lines of track. High levels of modification centers in center communication of crop circles of a new design position of program locations. Okay, done by equation. We're done. It's all done through modification. Okay. Channel streams and set lines of high interference comes in a face recognition time sequence. Puts all levels in set location. All right. All right. But I just truly want you to understand how to set these things up through perimeters and parameters in line position locations in all levels of communication. How it's all set up in this equation. Right? So that's all it is. Schematics and high calculation, right? More memory sets, more uplinks. So we got an uplink setting into a downshift cross, sets lines of dx, sets lines of du, sets position of x and position of y and z. Z lines equal lines of coordinate in high position of 3 settings, x line positions into y line center. Now it sets position locations into A positions, into B and position of C, up wing sing line and position of track lines, and 2 arrows on indication. Now directional communication line center sets the ground setting. You have to understand when you get your formulas, you have to understand how to set up the portals of tunnels of communication of center calculations. Directing lines of communication lines crosses lines of D lines of U, D lines of X, and platform communication lines of A, B's, and C's in position of track to its balanced communication lines, upswing in position of programs and set location. Okay, done by equation. All right. So everybody's getting a little bit of understanding how the platitude line screen sets position your formulas, right? So we go in bracket communication lines, we go into 3x, we go into 3x, and we go into 3x. Now that equal lines of communication, the Merkaba line settings in position of north lines, east lines, and south set location. Setting direct signals in position of modified high calculation lines of 0 coordinates setting in travel communications. Crosses line symbols and set position of its calculations into A track and a B set line calculation. Okay? So position line calculation line stream sets position of half line circle. See the direct signals and modification line screens? Sets position of 0, calculation lines, crossing line symbols, crossing line divisions, and open sequence panels, and open line high centers, high position locations, and face calculation stream and direction. Multipass. See the face line? So the center correlation setting position of 3 lines of 3 and 3 position track line is 3 position of all levels over pi. So that's 3 track line settings, 3 lines of 4, 3 lines of 4, 3 lines of 4. And position equal lines high, position equal lines of 4. So we got a 4 track line setting in a cosmic universe line string position operation. Done by equation. All right. Center communication line settings, brackets to its interference and position of its location. Now, directing lines of communication setting is really to understand how to set up bracket communication lines into x equals lines of 10, 10 equals lines of 2, and track location. Okay. So you get into Roman numbers, and then we go into 2 I line centers and position locations, right? So that's level lines, equal lines of pi, okay? It gets complicated. Now it indicates a 1 in position of platforms, center position of travel lines, and direct signals in position locations, all right? Now directing position of panels crosses lines of platforms. There's so many ways to set position of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations of its dimensional scales in calculation of 3 pi's and track locations in position. Okay, walking platforms in triangulation reset position programs and track location. Okay, done by equation. All right, so these got to be set up line schematics line settings. So we got schematics equals lines of 1 plus travel's calculation line interference, 3 line communication, 3 line division, sets lines equal line communication triangulation, equal lines of box, set position travel. Okay, so we take the box, 2 panels communication line screen, right? Directs communication lines and platforms in position of travel calculation, right? Sets position locations in position location of 3 lines of pi and traction line. Direct line calculation split the anomalies high position location of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 9 million tracks equals lines of 1 lines of second. Sets position of perimeters into 24 lines of equal lines of set location, 60,000 line tracks, sets position locations at 120,000 line signals into 0 seconds in high position locations and new ground settings, operation surface, and circuit lines of elements and point lines of track line conditions and 2 panels of communication centers of travel calculation. Wind sail, solar sail, dimensional sail, it's all set up through provision. So, and set line calculation setting comes in position to its location of its platforms and center communication to all calculation modification. Okay? Tractor's communication line setting is position of triangulation, position of programs. All right, that's my equation. All right, set these formulas up is really understand how to put your position, location of travels. Point lines of track lines, settings, positions, calculations. So 2 graphing panels and 4 pillars in track locations and measure. Okay, direct lines of communication. Now we come to the security walls and 2 panels of communication settings, Hemdahl and McCall. Setting direct lines in the high calculation, 3 lines of wires and track line connections with 3 line provision line cycles, directing signals, right? Modification setting 1, position of 2, and position of 3 in infusion. Direct calculation line centers opens all signals and position location of space anomalies in track location. Now this directs the signals and line calculation lines. Bracket communication lines of point tracks and 2 line centers of 3 track locations. Position location centers and line calculation lines walking the symbols and set location. Directing lines of communication comes in energetic flow, sets lines in position of its bridge in a rainbow stream and align position of security lines in 5 track line calculation setting to the cerebral cortex of design. That's my equation. All right, so getting that position location center is really understand how to split the line screens in 2 track lines in position, right? Sets lines in equal line communication of center. 1 indicates 1 line centers of travel. Directs communications in a triangulation line position. Operation service location of ground settings position locations. Splits the line centers into tube centers and 2 track line settings in position of operation. Direct communication line center is center position, center calculations, and center programs of space travel. Okay, now direct line calculation, we have the magnetic highway, the data highway, the OMI highway, and center calculation. All right, now a direct, you see that pause? Point lines of track, box lines, TV substance communication. This is where you come to transition line calculation, your game centers, and 3 travels of mechanism. Point lines of high center interference and position actual projections. Point lines of track into 1, into 2, and 3 set location of rainbow graph settings. Sets position to its operation of platforms. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set location. Platforms have communication lines, graphing calculation line settings. All levels, open sequence, open panels of communication. That's my equation. All right, so we're in the highways now and set lines of communication setting. So the infusion lines of 1, 2, and 3 line centers is in travel. Okay, 2 centers in travel communications, right? 3 position location of formation line screens. Setting direct lines of communication levels in center communication setting into a black hole and center calculation. Now, directing signal line connections comes into modification lines of 0 and position of space line communication setting, position of traction. Now, direct lines communication comes into platforms, center position to its operation, right? Slides down the signals, 45-degree angle on the opposite line calculation setting. We have an XT1001 position of 2 and position of 3 track locations. So directing lines communication upswings, position lines, 3 calculation lines, scan position location high centers, and travel position location of point centers of traction. Okay, it's all third opposite location or T reception line screen. So it's amazing what an XT1000 can do as it sets up perimeters and parameters in line calculation setting and position location near primals and position of travel calculation line system to open communication setting to travel. So directing lines of communication, that's done. And if you look really, really close, you can see the position modification. Right? Center calculation line stream is this an equation, guys. Right here. Boom. Yep. So getting back and set lines and high center interference is getting no communication or wall line connection. Woo! All right. So I know you guys are blown away, but the center position location has a 1-line signal. Okay. Now we use the 1-line signal into point graph lines in 3 and 4 track locations. All right. Position lines and calculation lines of bracket communication of 1, 2, and 3 set connections. Okay. Setting provisions of 4, setting positions of 3, and center position. Right. Sets lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 graph calculations. 45-degree angles and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 track location. Platforms of communication lines is 0 and position location is center. Okay. Setting platforms and communication line systems and 2 track line connections and positions and line connecting high setting. Okay. Setting position locations all levels, dimensional door, and platform locations into a location grid and position energetic dorm center and track location setting in all levels of operation. Done by equation. Set a position location line center 0, sets position location 24 and position 48 in the 72 computer frame. There's the computer frame. Direct lines of 4, lines of 3, and positional calculations 7 in track line connecting high centers, in travel positions, and open sequence of communication. Calculation line interference comes into platform communication. Crest lines, high center interference, in position of X lines, changing time centers, and travel calculation line centers, a box position of TV frames in site location. Done by equation. All right. I know it's a lot to be in position travels of, but it's point track location of setting, right? All right. So getting into measure, the correlation panels and direct signal location system is really to understand how the platitude and triangulation resets point lines of track into a matrix cube in set location. Modification line screen sets position of box centers and position of 2 wavings in central calculation. Now, point lines of track, graphing screen lines set location of box centers in position of 3, 4, and 5 set location of setting. Okay. Directing modification line centers in position of ground lines and center communication cross line stream interference sets position of track lines into fluctuation in travel calculations of point centers of track. Setting position location of 2 panels in security fields in track location. Closing in monitors in position to its locations, open signals, open panels, open doors, open calculated line streams in set location. Okay. Directing lines of communication lines has a location grid center in position location. That protects anomalies of your earth, your perception screen settings, and operation service location, your astral projections, and your astral planes, and your soul planes and track locations. Look, it's done. Right? So left line communications, X2000, point lines of track, sets position travel lines, half lines of measure, goes through, right? And comes out, back in equation into the moon line rotation surface in center calculations. Okay, now we're done. That's it. Modification lines of screen lines, high center mainframes, and position of travel lines are in box centers. The travel position location of TV receptor line calculating line settings. The distributed locations of pi, the X2000 stream interference is now in set position of its operation location to its moon. In positions to operation locations come into 0 settings and travel calculations. Done my equation. We're done. That's it. But it's amazing how you get these things done in equation, right? So it's really interesting how you set up security panels and position of travel calculations all through your platforms. Starting in this through its equation, right from all calculation lines and formula of set location. Hoo-ah. Okay? We're done. That's it. All mainframes are back in circuit line communication setting. Earth, position your astral planes, communication soul planes into fusion one line circuit position of pockets. Get a position on travel calculator lines into mothership, position location of recharge, position line connection settings, and all travel calculation settings back into all communication modems. All right? See you in 5.